So often, once a manager has had their employee take the DISC personality assessment, their next question is, how do I go through this with my employee so that they get the most out of it? So, we have made a guide for you to take your employees through, and it just gives you a very basic template in order for you to take somebody through it who you've had take it. So, the leader's job is to create the positive environment, encourage self awareness, to ask questions that evoke new ways of thinking, to remain curious, and to use DISC personalities in a way that supports development and growth. One thing as you're going into this is really just an introduction to DISC. Oftentimes, you take 3 to 5 times before somebody actually really grasps DISC and can apply it to themselves. So, this is not to say, hey, how can you best relate with other people? Or can you pick out DISC in other people? This is really focused on the person who's taken it to figure out, okay, what is DISC? Introduce them to that, and then to figure out what their personality type is, because sometimes people will take the assessment. Doesn't happen very often, but sometimes it does, and they'll say, that's nothing like me. So if that happens, then you need to get to the bottom of what their personality type is, because this is really about learning about oneself and not about labeling. So it's just gaining that self-awareness, and that's your objective in this first meeting with your employee. So what should you bring? You should bring the DISC assessment results to the meeting. And the purpose is to understand DISC personalities and increase self-awareness. So the first thing you're going to do is establish the intent. So as you're sitting down, you can say, you've just taken this assessment. I'm here with you today. What would you most like to get out of this meeting that we have so that we can use our time wisely? And often people will have something that they're really curious about, or something that they would like to work on, or just something that immediately comes to their mind. And so your job is to figure out what that is and ensure that they've achieved that by the end of the meeting with you. And then the results assessment. So what did you think about your results? Were they accurate? On page 5 and 6 of their assessment results, then you have them underline everything they agree with over 60%. So you leave them for a little bit, you give them some space, and you just have them underline what resonates with them. And then after that, you introduce them to DISC. So on this page here, there's the DISC personalities wheel, and you can go through each. So the dominant, inspiring, conscientious, and supportive. You can just give them a brief explanation of that. What's verbal, nonverbal, task versus people, proactive versus reactive. And then just go through everything and explain everything to them so that they have a good sense of what everything is, and ask if anything would change based off of what they've highlighted. And then you can go into the impact. So what stands out to you? What are your biggest areas of strength? What areas are you weak in? And explain the knowing and doing gap. So there's a difference between knowing something and doing something about it than just knowing and just being complacent. And that's what a lot of us get comfortable in doing. So, if you're a high C and you have very high standards and you hold people to that, and you just don't want to, you can know that you're a perfectionist and that you expect perfection out of other people. But it's another thing to say, okay, I'm going to work on working better with others by reducing my standards a little bit, both for myself and for other people. So there's a difference between knowing something and doing something about it. And that's what we'd like to get out of somebody, is actually doing something about it. So then you go into the commit. So what can you commit to doing for the next meeting based on your insights? What support do you need? And then the next step is to do a follow-up meeting. So this is really to just introduce somebody to DISC and go through their report with them and find some ways to help them and support them be a better communicator and more self-aware.